think we can go ahead and kick it off. What do you say?
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's we're not getting any younger, and it is Thanksgiving week, so we're probably going to be opening up. I think this conversation probably to a smaller but more fun group here.
That's fine. But we record these for posterity and good cheer. I'm Sam Tallman. I'm Director of Energy Services for Green Power Technologies Puerto Rico. We develop small hydro projects here in Puerto Rico and beyond. And I'm joined by my conversation partner and founding director of Fundación Boricana, Tom King. Tom, good morning. Good afternoon.
Hey guys, yeah, good afternoon for me. Good morning for you guys. It's a decent afternoon and day here in Spain. So this will be, I guess, last broadcast while I'm in Spain this year.
And
So,
it's
uh, so
our and it's our last general forum meeting of 2024 as well. We
correct.
have coming up the third Thursday of December. We have Brian Colt, who will be talking to us about renewable natural gas production here in Puerto Rico, what the future of that is, what the role it can play is for the island, and also for some of the landfill operations. So we'll have a long conversation about that on December 19th. That's our Power Hour segment exclusive for members. If you're a member, you'll already have it in your inbox and in your calendar. If you're not a member, we encourage you to join and certainly get access to that conversation and some of the other ones. Giancarlo, the first CIO for the government of Puerto Rico, a data scientist and real estate guru here in Puerto Rico. So our conversation today, actually, before we get into our conversation today, we have two other housekeeping notes, which is we will have pre-recorded segments that we're going to release for the following Thursday after the conversation with Brian, as well as the last Tuesday of the year for our general forum. That Tuesday happens to also fall on the 31st of December. And so in the spirit of the end of the year, we'll be giving a pre-recorded segment as a gift to everybody and hope you enjoy it. Love to hear your feedback.
Unless maybe we should do like a live conversation at about 11 p.m. on the 31st and just lead everybody into the new year.
I think if we have a small audience with us today, Tom, we may have a smaller audience with us then. I think pre-recorded is the way to go. But nevertheless, that's what the Puerto Rico Energy Forum programming looks like between here and the end of 2024. We'll also be meeting with membership groups on two working issues that we're putting together. One is on microgrid development here in Puerto Rico, and the other is on circular economy. If you're interested in participating in either, reach out to us, let us know.
Yep.
We'd love to hear from you and get your feedback on how those groups can be as meaningful and productive, particularly as we want to hit 2025 running. 2025 holds some exciting stuff for the forum. We're going to have a website. We're going to have a blog capacity. We're going to have a much more formal calendar than we currently do. So keep your eyes peeled for that, and we'll definitely be announcing that more in the coming weeks and in the beginning of January when we get back together. I think with that, and going back to our pre-show banter, Tom, I'm back and forth between optimism and pessimism when it comes to thinking about the future of energy in Puerto Rico, and that's a little distressing to me because I'm an optimist by nature. But I see so many indications of writing on the wall that we're running towards certain cliffs that concern me. Javier and I were at an event put on by La Alianza Pro Desarrollo Energético, which is made up of Ciro Group, Ecoelectrica,
Hmm.
so utility scale solar, utility scale natural gas production, fueled power, um, AES, which is the coal, but they also have utility scale solar, and Genera, the generation company for PREPA. So very diversified perspective on what's happening in the industry, and they're sounding alarm bells. These folks also sit, and we talked to Arnaldo Bisonó on the forum, who's the president of the Energy Committee for Industriales, and they're sounding the alarm bells that we're 36 months away from the coal plant shutting down. That's 500 megawatts of the cheapest power that's currently being produced on the island. And while nobody's in favor of either new coal, more coal, renewed coal, all the above, we don't have a replacement plan. We talked a little bit about this with Eduardo Batia recently. We don't have a
Yeah.
plan, and that is of serious concern. We just got news in the last couple of weeks that New Fortress themselves announced that they've got going concern with regards to their own liquidity and capacity to function as a corporation in the new year. So that's our natural gas supplier for the island. Um, and frankly, while we've seen a lot of really astounding movement in the solar industry, um, it is not yet at a point where it's even close to replacing that sort of base load power production on an island wide level. That's concerning. At
Sure.
this event that Javier and I went to, they said, "Look, we're 36 months away from shutting down Guayama's coal plant." And the folks from GE's gas turbine unit who were giving a presentation said, "And we're commercially, our turbines are 40-month wait list.
Mhm.
So if you do everything perfect tomorrow, we're 4 months behind schedule." And yeah, I mean that's a long time in political terms, right? It's towards the end of the next administration. And yet from a technological perspective, from an economic development perspective, from an industry timeline, it's tomorrow. It's right around the corner, and I'm grateful they're sounding the alarm bells, but they seem to be the only ones.
I mean, I don't think they're the only ones sounding the alarm bells, but I mean, they're still pretty hard to hear them, right? I mean, I think we get into a new Congress, new administration, and people start talking about let's get rid of Luma or let's investigate Luma and let's get all these things going. It's like that is purely secondary. It's also counterproductive, but in a way, hopefully this stuff should take its place. None of this is helped by the fact that it's still in bankruptcy, right? Solve the bankruptcy, and you don't automatically solve these problems, but more solutions become available to some of these problems. So I think I guess I'm a little surprised that a New Fortress is having going concern issues. I'm not quite sure what it is. They're much bigger than just what's going on in Puerto Rico. I don't have any idea exactly what portion, but it probably has to do with working capital. It probably has to do with collections and a few other things. The infrastructure's here. They're not kind of mid-build or other types of things. If you're relying on them to potentially be building out additional or new infrastructure, that could become problematic in terms of servicing new even quote unquote temporary gas plants, etc. I mean, you can find anybody, frankly, and maybe somebody better to replace them as purchaser once you can get rid of them, if that becomes an issue. It's just that you enter into a period of uncertainty. On the plus side, unlike Puerto Rico, they could go into a Chapter 11, right? Organize a plan, go into Chapter 11, have these things worked out. On the downside, that could lead to the judge abrogating agreements, right, in the settlement. As long as the judge does this, it breaks this agreement, we can still supply, but it's going to have to be at a different price because we can't supply it economically at this particular price. So you could end up with a bit of that, and then you might not be able to unilaterally terminate those agreements if you're Puerto Rico. So greater periods of uncertainty, doesn't help anybody. But it's nobody should be thinking, oh my God, we're not going to get any gas, or oh my God, everything's the lights are going to go out necessarily. The delta is probably in costs that are likely to be incurred, and a potential delay in new infrastructure or building infrastructure because of the added uncertainty. So not a good situation, but perhaps not completely disastrous, except the fact that it's not happening in a vacuum where everything else is perfect. It's happening in Puerto Rico where very little of everything else is perfect. So you said optimist, pessimist. I think I'm I mean, I'm optimistic about the things that are going on in Puerto Rico because we see them every day in terms of microgrids and distributed solar and changes in certain attitudes and small amounts but important private capital, uh, better flows, better power being put into distributed last mile from some of the federal government programs. And these are all like points of light, if you want to think about it. I guess I'm more pessimistic about that point in time where energy becomes a driver of economic growth and stability in Puerto Rico, as opposed to continuing to be a drag on it, which it seems like it's going to be a drag on overall economic development and growth for a longer period of time.
Well, and just sticking on the natural gas point, I mean, I think that's right, and that's you and I have talked about the J curve, and so there's a right. We are clearly, I think, still on the downward slope of on the front end of that before we
It's
come.
it's the backward part, right? It's the down and backward part of the J curve.
It's that's exactly right. So we're on the very
Yeah.
beginning of what will ultimately be a path towards a nadir, a low point where energy is actually driving. It is a drag on growth potential as opposed to the driving force for it. And I think that should be seen as a real concern. I've been talking to a couple of folks that do economic analysis. One of the things that I'd love to see is a study that shows what happens when people's electricity bills are higher than their property tax rates. And my guess is that those two lines crossing indicates a mass outmigration movement, and I'm guessing that those two lines crossed sometime in the early 2000s, if not late 90s. One of the reasons being is that so much of your disposable income is going towards a low quality, high cost, heavy burden service provision like electricity here in Puerto Rico, and so little of your wealth goes towards the creation of equity and the creation of personal, social, community wealth, which is in large part measured by an adequate property tax system. And those two lines are definitely on the different side of each other in competing jurisdictions where I can actually buy a home. I can watch the value of it fluctuate with markets. I can continue paying into it, and my disposable income that's going towards electricity is relatively fractional compared to what it's going into a long-term asset that serves as an investment for your family. That's sort of a side, and I don't want to get too much into that. But if anybody out there is interested in doing that study, please get in touch. I'd love to collaborate on that. Going back to the natural gas conversation, because I think this is a really critically important one. I think everyone swallowed the pill that AES will be closing. And I think that everybody who sees that as a reasonable pathway forward is of the mind that natural gas is going to need to step up and play an important transition role for the island to continue, and not just from coal, right, but from diesel and other bunker fuels, to transition to a much cleaner and cheaper power production, matrix across the
Right.
island. Um, it'll be curious. This is not new from New Fortress. There have been reports for a couple of years now showing that their business model may not be viable, and it's really not an asset based company. Most of their value comes from the provision contracts that they have, and uh, uh, so it's not even clear what they would be able to do to sell assets. I think their largest asset is the one that in the floating. They don't call it a barge because it has a ship they have off of the coast in San Juan, and that's while it's a global company, that's a concern. Who would be able to come in and fill their role, particularly as we've talked about, their off taker is still by and large this bankrupt entity. Um, so you know, we've got coal that's going to be phased out. We've got its replacement potentially at serious risk here. And this is maybe the best way to transition is there's been reports of continuing downward performance from Luma and Genera with regards to outages, cost of operations, duration of outages, sort of your standard metrics for measuring utility performance. And we have a governor-elect who's coming in who has indicated, along with her competitors in the most recent election cycle, that Luma para fuera is very much a live and on the table tactic for the new administration, and this is where the optimism pessimism comes in. The inability for me to foresee what will come down the pike is what I guess is the most serious concern is
Yeah.
from an investment community, from an economic growth and development community. We can handle a whole bunch of sclerosis in the system as long as we understand what the path looks like, right? Slow but stable is a lot better than breakneck and unstable, and we seem to be teetering on that side of things.
Yeah. And yeah, look, they're going to get a rude awakening. I think. I hope. I hope they awaken at some point. Unfortunately, the parties that are not in government are going to continue to try and keep themselves in ignorance. But Puerto Rico's in a bind, right? I mean, you can't. The one pathway that might open itself up would be an actual privatization, a total privatization, right, of the system, where effectively you're throwing your hat out there and you're saying, hey, we need people who are going to bring capital. We need people who are going to invest in the system. We need people who want to, be here for the long haul. And we're going to privatize the whole system. We're going to hold you accountable, and we're going to regulate you. And you're going to have to bring in, X amount of billions of dollars and rebuild the system, et cetera. Um, you can't, but first of all, nobody wants to do that in Puerto Rico. It's going to be really difficult. You think the prices are high now, they'll be higher still for a little while, but they will have the opportunity of coming down. Um, on the other hand, and the reason that they're doing this the way that they have done it with this agent program with Luma and Canada is you're going to lose most of your federal money because they have this all set up to be given to the state effectively or the state companies in the case of PREPA. So the reason that they didn't go all the way with the privatization before is that the billions of dollars from the federal government wouldn't have been able to be used to reinstate the and other things. Of course, they expected PREPA to be out of bankruptcy 3 years ago.
Years ago,
Uh,
yeah.
and they expected to, the Luma contract was supposed to start they weren't even really considering back then the privatization of the oil plants. They figured they would just eventually close because you'd have the privatization, or sorry, you'd have the bankruptcy resolved. You'd have the agency role for a number, 15 years, which you can, and then you could redecide what you did with it. And at that point, you'd have a stable operating system and grid. And so it's not entirely, but it's close to a no-brainer, right? You've got a credit-worthy counterparty that's just starting out, and we've got 3,000 to 5,000 megawatts of utility scale solar and other things to bring in, including gas. And so now it's different. You're putting out an RFP with a plan, not to a bankrupt entity. There's is a different set of characteristics that you're facing. Hence, I keep coming back to let's get it out of bankruptcy. Everybody starts changing their mind about whether or not they want to be in business with Puerto Rico for on an energy basis. I'm talking about people with huge balance sheets, right? You're talking about investment at scale. You're talking about participation in actively providing energy at scale, and you're talking about dealing with people who are not startups like Fortress, like New Fortress, right? Who typically work with high margin developing markets and people with deep balance sheets who can bring their low cost of capital to provide good stable financing and long-term access to capital and good operations, and they make healthy money. They have more access to resources. They have more access to qualified people, than any of the startups that we're dealing with now. I mean, we're lucky in a way that we have AES already on the island, that we have Ecoelectric on the island, that they have people and partners like Total who they can work with, who are not afraid of working within this market, even to the tune of effectively $1 billion for the solar plants that they're going forward in phase one with the guarantee from the loan program. That doesn't get them off the hook. I mean, ultimately, the loan guarantee is guaranteed by those corporations. So this is 100% on balance sheet for those corporations working in Puerto Rico. But again, they're getting leverage, which they might not be able to do. They're getting leverage not at the corporate level; they're getting it at the asset level. And so even if they have to incorporate it in their overall balance sheet, it's nice that they've actually got the leverage. So it's these are good things that are going on, but they're baby steps. It doesn't change the game completely in terms of access to capital and interest in working in Puerto Rico. Yeah.
Well, and access to reliable electricity. I mean, that's the end of the
Right.
day for the people on the island, businesses and individuals alike, and ultimately the government too, right? And one of the things that full privatization sounds like something that is totally of disinterest to not only the electorate but also to the powers that be. Though it feels a little bit like people will say we're already privatizing, and I think almost the flip side of people who are in favor of socialism or communism. They said, well, true communism has never been tried, and it's like, well, true privatization has not really been tried. On the other hand, we have Ecoelectrica, we have AES. Those are totally private entities that are
Yep.
that are generating power. All of the independent utility scale farms are going to be private entities. And so we do have, to a large extent, a system that favors privatization. The problem is that even if we're saying, okay, we're going to have purely private generation come online moving forward, then it's we've seen that there's significant challenges in just getting the project, the legacy projects, the existing generators to successfully be here for the long term. Now we'll see. We don't have those utility scale farms up and operating yet. but the proof's in the pudding, right? And we don't have yet the evidence to show really where it is. I want to talk, Tom. You mentioned that all of this indicates higher cost electricity, and fundamentally that's right. That's the other piece that seems not to be. Those are the other alarm bells that aren't being sounded so
Yeah.
loudly. The Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, the independent regulator, back in September, declined to approve rate increases for this last quarter of 2024. Now, if you read that regulation, it's a little bit bizarre. There's five regulators. They voted two and two. One wasn't available for that vote. And by default, if they're stuck without a majority, then the preference goes to inaction. That, of course, leaves Puerto Rico in a bind. Luma is operating at $130+ million in revenue insufficiency, in part because rates aren't sufficiently reflective of the cost to operate the system. Nevertheless, what it means is that in January, when they take up that rate case again, it's going to go up by more than what it would normally do it. And we're facing these generation crunches. And so, in our business, for instance, where we're offering a rate on the PPA that is a percentage of, so it's really based on the savings rate. That savings rate today might be 30%, but at the end of next year might be closer to 50. And that's really significant for private and independent power producers. It's really
Yeah.
hard on the consumers that aren't able to be prosumers, aren't able to operate industrial microgrid, able to cost them more,
Yeah.
and it's going to continue to cost them more.
I think there's a great opportunity. Actually, I mean that's back to the points of optimism, right? I mean, one of the things about high energy cost environment, if you're providing distributed energy or private energy solutions, it gives you a lot of room in there in terms of the pricing to be more creative and still make a profit and take less risk, right? So uh, they hardly tried it, as far as I can tell, in Puerto Rico. But then there aren't too many people out there kind of selling these things that are taking big positions, and even your positions, you're taking effectively smaller positions, but you're growing a book, right? The idea though of being able to pitch this to somebody long term and say, hey, we're going to sell you this, in your case, this hydro facility, maybe with some storage or something else, that offsets and obviously we're not going to take, water risk coming through here, but within that, on the pricing side, we're going to tell you whatever we produce here, under the conditions, assuming that we're up, when we, as much as we should be, we're going to start here at 85% of the tariff that you're at. We're going to have a 2.5 or 3% escalator per year, but we're going to cap that and say that with all that escalation, we will never charge you. You will never pay more for this electricity than 5% less than whatever the then current rate is for PREPA. So from a sales point of view, from an operational point of view, they're locking in a certain amount of savings, against the rates of PREPA for 20 years or more, which you know can be very attractive. One of the
Yeah, it
things,
just you
yeah,
get caught in a catch-22 of an
yeah,
incredibly bloated overhead with a bankrupt system and people wanting to pay less. And
yeah,
so it goes back to who's willing to do that, and whose investors see what's happening to AES, which has their own financial issues, who sees what's happening with New Fortress, who has themselves come out and said, you talked about their financial issues, and said and says to themselves and to their team of financial partners, that opportunity, Tom, that you just laid out is attractive. When does it become attractive? Is it attractive today? I don't see that. Is it attractive when PREPA gets out of bankruptcy? I still think there might be some hesitancy from first movers. Now, maybe that's where the benefit right from the investment team comes in to say, okay, yeah, we're gonna take full advantage of the situation, and because the risk is higher for us because we're the first ones getting involved, we're going to be able to charge a higher premium. The problem is the Energy Bureau also is really trying to limit, I think, on one hand appropriately, on the other hand inappropriately, the cost of power that is provided into the system. Now, we've harked on this before, but the highest cost electricity is the power you don't have. And so at some point we have to say we're going to do it at any cost necessary because we have to have power, and we'd rather have expensive power than one, have everybody defect, right? And figure that doesn't matter at any scale, it's more advantageous for me to do it myself, or opt out entirely, which, I'm just not going to be an energy user in Puerto Rico, and I will leave and establish my business elsewhere. I think those two things, I don't know, again, I don't know where that balance is. It's of high concern for I think this next 4 year term, and I say 4 years just because, not because that's the political term, but because that is us hitting the generation cliff, and going overboard, or riding the ship and figuring out what 2030 and beyond looks like. What what I mentioned earlier about government efficiency, I think will play a key role here, not just on the local level, but also on the federal level. And that's another area of uncertainty, is what federal funds will be available to the island in what capacity for infrastructure projects, for emergency management projects. FEMA is in its own hot water on the national level for a variety of issues. Core three, and which is the central office of, oh, I'm gonna just say three words and I'm not sure they're the right ones: relief, recovery, and reconstruction, which is the local administrator of federal funds. There was just a report out that shows that Core three and the local Department of Housing, which is managing community development block grant, disaster relief, and mitigation fund, which are congressionally appropriated dollars. That in the last 6 or 7 years, they've spent nearly $2 billion in consultants just to manage these funds. I think rightly so, folks are looking around and saying, what did that money go to? That's close to 2% of the island's GDP just on consultants to figure out how to use the funds that are allocated to the island, which are under obligated. So again, you're looking at what is the economy and economic growth look like in the next couple of chapters. A lot of it is still very much buttressed by federal funds that aren't properly or not as effectively, I think is probably a better way to say it, not as effectively or seamlessly rolled out. And at the same time, you've got a federal administration coming into office that has really run on a platform of increasing government efficiency, particularly in the department, this Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy duo that is looking to claw back $2 trillion out of the federal budget. A lot of that money allocated for Puerto Rico may be at risk, part because it hasn't been spent yet, hasn't been allocated yet. Federal resources available to help it be rolled out may go the way of the dodo. It's not clear what the economic growth driver is going to be for the island moving forward in this next couple of years.
Yes, and it's it's especially confusing. The what's available, what you can't claw back, what's out there, etc. It's so different depending upon the nature of the bill, or I mean, there are even some funds that in certain areas can be obligated, allocated, and then moved under executive order within limits. I think we saw an example of that last, and presidents do this from time to time, but there's Trump actually took money from some military project and used it to fund boondoggle contractors uh, building the wall at the southern border, which an investigative report found that a lot of the money had actually been stolen. Unfortunately, or the wall not built the way it maybe needed to be. Um, Puerto Rico has somewhat the opposite problem. There is that they had great experience getting federal transfers, but not so much in kind of implementing federal grants and programs and other types of things. And I mean, certainly we're experienced with the whole thing through Vivienda, and it's it's a cluster. Um, they you're talking about an island all the way through that has no working capital. I mean, the government doesn't really have working capital, and they get tax revenues, etc. But they operate with folks. They're working they're walking off the back of the charities and the companies they're working with for working capital, right? So you spend the money, you ask for it back, and it takes 6 months for that money to come back. 6 months is kind to you under the grants, and they're effectively getting the information for you. Being really slow, delaying your ability to ask for money, and they're spending millions on contractors to help them with this, and the contractors are frankly no better than they are, but they have no experience of this. So, I mean, I can see that's part of it. Um, and it can it can only get better. Um, the thing is, we just don't know, which of those billions, if any, are likely to be rescinded. Can they be rescinded without legislative action? They can certainly be delayed, no
Yeah.
matter what, right? I mean, if you've got a good example would be some of the stuff from the Grid Development Office. Uh, some of the examples might be some of the funds at USDA or EPA. I mean, they are absolutely rushing to try and award and obligate dollars to people in programs. They're kind of doing it a little quick. They're kind of going off a little half cocked, but they're trying to make sure that those things get assigned. So some of the big IRA monies, in particular, through the EPA, and a little less so through, say, USDA or DOE. But the EPA had large amounts. The Commerce Department had certain amounts of funds that were allocated to it. Those are more likely to be stopped and clawed back. It's safe to say. Um, I think less so than say the FEMA stuff. But if if the Trump administration wants to slow that down, even after they're obligated, they could just clear out a bunch of people from the Grid Development Office, right? I mean, if there's nobody there to do it, then it can't really happen.
Yeah, emails go unresponded to. I want to make a quick comment about the point you made on working capital, because this is an important one.
Huge.
Even and the that's true at the highest levels. You mentioned AES and Total. They have, what was it, 830 something million dollars in a loan guarantee. It's not clear they would get the working capital without that loan guarantee, because that is what de-risks their investors and partners to say, okay, I can go in on this project. So their working capital is still very dependent on the ability to access federal dollars that backstop their projects. So this is not just at the nonprofit and small business level that's looking to do projects in with Vivienda, with CDBG funds, whatever it may be. It's at every level,
Yeah.
folks that are working in the system, and that's something to really keep an eye on. I think, going back to this point, that there's $1.7 billion spent on contractors for the administration of federal funds. It reminds me a little bit of a Charles Dickens novel called Bleak House, where you know the patriarch of this family. He's aging. He's going to die soon. His family is very concerned, not so much about his death, but about whether or not he signed his will. And so they present him with a will that would distribute all the assets, throughout the inheritance. And he's I don't have my glasses. They're at home, so he goes back to home, and of course, predictably dies before he has the opportunity to sign the will. And his ancestors then spend the bulk of the money in the estate to hire lawyers to fight over the inheritance, and then multiple generations down the line, the lawyers come back to three generations later, and they say there's no more money in the estate to pay us with. And I fear that we're in some similar situation where we're spending these federal dollars on figuring out how to spend the federal dollars, and at the end of the day not spending the federal dollars except for I think otherwise
Yeah.
successful consultants, and successful in the sense that they can continue to renew their contracts because they're the knowledge base, and we're not actually building. This goes back to the economic development concerns. We're not building the indigenous knowledge within the institutions that will ultimately be doing the work in the long term, and we need to. Those are the folks that will be managing government
Yeah.
offices, agencies, bureaucracies, and we need. Every
Yeah.
government all over the place uses consultants, but that should be for specialized skills, not for just the bulk of doing the work that is your writ, constitutionally or by law. So
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I don't know what these advisors are for all sorts of things, and I did think you mentioned they would goes back 6 or 7 years, so really basically to the start of the bankruptcy, and I don't know how many of these are lawyers working on the bankruptcy, but it's still it's a huge number, and it's still going on. I think there's just no professionalism in the government of Puerto Rico, in the institutions of government in Puerto Rico. It was done one way, with the bankruptcy and the Junta Supervisión. Now they have to begin to operate a bit more like an American state because people are looking over their shoulders. There was lots and lots of business as usual tried, and suddenly the FBI is knocking on people's doors and looking to ask people questions. And so if you think about what happened, from say 2017 and onward, it just shook the people in government. They were never expecting that. So there's this whole kind of cover your ass attitude that goes on, and probably rightfully so, but there's no balance and there's no experience, right? If you're an individual in uh, in the government in Puerto Rico, yeah, you have rational, fiduciary obligations if you're administering, like, the grant monies and things like that. But oh my God, I mean, your job is actually to get that money out the door as fast as you can. This is recovery money. These are dollars that are going to rebuild. These are dollars that are going to train, retrain, you know, develop economic activity. It's not to continue to take your time and bleed the country dry of people and working capital because this signature was in the wrong place on this form, or this I is dotted, or you have six different people who are looking at the same thing and they each want you to do it a different way, in order to, conform and supply your. So, no, that's you need to have that level of detail if you're on a huge construction project and you've got millions and millions of dollars and lots of things, but so many of the nonprofits have their training programs or workforce programs or assistance programs where they're going out there and they're spending less than $1 million a year, basically. There are some with construction, but you really need to work with these people and just process the money. It's not
well,
your money anyway. It's the federal money, and it's there to get out there. And at that level, if somebody is actually misspending or or pocketing, you're going to catch them eventually. But the amount that you spend, like somebody checking every little thing and doing things on a grant that amounts to 300,000 or $350,000 a year, you're spending somebody's salary like $50,000 a year processing stuff and doing a bad job
Yeah,
for a $350,000 grant. So spend 50,000 on a $35 million a year grant. Yeah, for
sure.
sure.
I think it
Yeah.
comes back to, institutional culture within these government offices. Giancarlo last week at our Puerto Rico Energy in 60 Minutes segment made this comment at the end of our segment, which he said, it depends entirely on who's put into those roles. How do we achieve government efficiency on the Puerto Rico level? And this I always think it's a bit of a cop out, but I don't think it's wrong here to say it's a matter of will. There needs to be a will to say, yeah, we're going to trim fat and get it done faster, better, and really have an attitude of public service. This is the Fiscal Oversight and Management Board has an uphill battle here, right? Because they're tasked with instilling that renewed sense of public service and cultural institutional cultural integrity within these government agencies and these gigantic bureaucracies. And now they
Mhm.
have a massive turnover, and they have to start over with folks that are coming into these public corporations and agencies anew. um, I think there's also an element here which is um, and I've mentioned this before, but the leadership across the board needs to be able to articulate that we are and need to act like we are in a moment of austerity. And that is unpopular, it's uncomfortable, it often is incredibly painful for a lot of people. And I think it's worth being sensitive to that reality. But nevertheless, you can't design a rocket without taking into consideration gravity, and we seem to be not neither willing to tighten the belt nor slow our spending, and so or slow our consumption. Even just while we're recording this, the current governor administration indicated that
Yeah.
federal or sorry, state level employees will get a Christmas bonus of $1,000 a piece. Now, I'm not opposed to anybody getting a Christmas bonus, but when 20 to 25% of all the employment on the island is made up of government, and you have
Yeah.
a government
You-
entity that's just out of bankruptcy, and a bunch of its subsidiaries, in terms of PREPA and other government agencies that are still in bankruptcy, there's a degree of imprudence in that decision. And um, Puerto Rico's got the largest public sector in the U.S. per capita. It's one of the lowest, government revenue uh, numbers per capita out of any government in the U.S. And it's policies like that do nothing to move us forward. Now, government requires good people. We need to incentivize people to work and show up and do their jobs and come into these roles and be interested in the recruiting elements of this. But you do the math at the end of the
yeah.
day, and it looks more and more like we're getting to launch day and not having taken into consideration gravity in our rocket construction. So
No, you'd be better. I mean, we're not the first people to make these points, but the I always the Christmas bonus thing is for government employees is and it's a little odd for people who haven't kind of grown up with the government of Puerto Rico or companies in Puerto Rico. Like there are statutory bonuses that have to be paid, and it's if people have worked a number of days, and it's like minimum of like $300, and it go or if you've been there a year and it goes up. So it's $1,000 isn't really that much, and it's part of the base pay. Basically, the way it's not really a bonus. I mean, we tend to call it a bonus. Um, Having said all that, it's become a lightning rod, from the early days when the junta canceled it. Yeah, at one point when they were paying it. It's calculated not as a bonus. It's calculated as part of the base pay. It's in the budgets of or should have been if it wasn't. So it's an easy target, but the truth is you should be reducing the headcount of government, right? Cut government. You don't have to save any money because people are generally underpaid, undermotivated, career wise, etc. Cut 20%, and take that 20% or 75% of that 25%, and pay the good people you keep better, right? And don't worry about that. Begin to come down. You'll have a things will work better. If it's not just, I'm here in my little job for life in my cubicle, um, you know, no risk, they won't fire me kind of government setup. So, I mean, it's an odd topic, frankly, that we've kind of gotten onto here, that we often sometimes do, and it's the perfect day to do it. But yeah, we need efficiency in the government in Puerto Rico, and I think unfortunately at the federal level, they may be cutting departments, which is not bad, but they're also changing the amount of turnover in an administration if they follow through and pass some of the recommendations where you have this whole level of political appointees that come down a very low level into a technical capacity level, and you swap them all out with a new administration. That's what happens in Puerto Rico. That's what, like, Project 2025, like, to me, I don't really mind some of the stuff that they're talking about in 2025, but the most destructive thing they could do is to create this whole swath of politically appointed jobs in the ranks of the professional ranks of the federal government. And at change of administration, you would just lose all of that continuity that you need, all of that experience for effectively political cronyism. And what does that sound like? That sounds like Puerto Rico.
So, Tom, let's end on a high note here. I think we're coming up on an hour. It is the week of Thanksgiving after all. I think we can be grateful for the fact, and I know that Gabby was going to join us at some point. One of the things that I'm particularly grateful for is the fact that there's an excellent energy community in Puerto
Great,
Rico.
great
We,
group.
we we talked earlier about the fact that there are not enough people sounding the alarm bells. I think that it's still worth mentioning that there's a lot of people that are. There's a lot of people that are having serious conversations with regards to energy, and I think we can be grateful for that, and find some optimism in that new administrations on the local and federal level will have cogent voices advising them. So something that we can obviously check back in on the new year and see where we are with that. But I think that the challenges are apparent to enough people that the importance is elevated to the appropriate channels. One of the things I want to end on: Tennessee Volunteers looks like they're going to make the playoffs. That's great news. We got to close out strong. Got to beat the Vanderbilt Commodores. And basketball's undefeated. I mean, we just won a tournament in the Bahamas. Everything's going well if you're a Volunteers fan. Tom, what's the future? What is the next year for Fundación Borincana have in store? Continuing on this trend of finding good news in the coal mine.
Wow. Yeah, I mean we're still operating the pre-cap and the solar IT programs through next year, at least through July on pre-cap. They both, speaking of like the federal programs and allocation of dollars, etc. They they have to get reauthorized next year to be extended. They're supposed to go to the middle of 2026, but we'll we'll see. But that's the life of a nonprofit. We're working with NREL and the LEAP program to provide training to folks in certain communities, the Micro de la Montaña, so CPs, groups and programs there. We're looking for different ways to provide training. We are continuing to do work with the USDA and the Renewable Energy for America program to provide application assistance and energy assessment reports and things in the process to get more folks in Puerto Rico signed up and getting capital. The bonus monies for uh, the the IRA bonus monies that haven't run out yet. So the grants, which under the program are 25%, will continue to be 50% for a number of years, but only until like that money is spent and it's been allocated out over the next 3 years. So it's interesting. It's really a good idea to get your application in during the first quarter or maybe the first 2 quarters of the next 3 years, because you'll likely be able to get the 50% bonus subsidy, rather than the 25%. I'm not quite sure exactly how it's going to work, but 25% is pretty good. The loans
Yeah.
that they have are actually pretty good and low interest, but the loans don't work well with some of the homegrown Puerto Rican programs. So, agroenergética, apoyo energética, you can actually double dip on some of these things. You can double dip with some of the finance programs. These are small points of light, if you like. And then the other one that kind of is on the horizon, and I'm sure more will come up. We recently submitted or were submitted. Let's put that a different way. A Along with a proposal to the EPA, which was due last week, uh, to fund infrastructure investment at communities, multi-unit, low income housing, and community develop, alongside Volunteers of America, looking to help support that, but at the same time, uh, funding that would allow us to write a handbook, of how to develop, community energy and be able to share that with, community groups and other things along that way. So that could be very interesting. Probably won't know. We will definitely know a lot sooner than we would normally expect to know whether we get lifted, because it's money that they're trying to get out the door. But we won't know for several weeks. But that could be a lot of fun, and begin to build a pathway. To be honest, I joked. I said we're gonna publish it as the Idiot's Guide to Community Energy Development. Anyway, so those are some of the things coming up for the Fundación in 2025.
Well, I think that's an excellent place to leave it. Uh, Everyone have a very happy Thanksgiving and time with family and good food. And we will pick back up on December 19th at our Power Hour segment with Brian Colt talking about renewable natural gas development here in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
If you're not a member, become a member. If you're a member, we'll see you there. And
And it'll actually be 5 p.m. for me instead of 11 p.m. So works.
yeah, even better. All right, everybody, have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks all. Bye.